Hey y'all, it's Irnise. Welcome back to my channel. So glad to have you here where I discuss everything between healthcare and the law and some of my business insights as well. A lot of people ask me, should a nurse become a lawyer? How do you go to law school? What was your journey? And I'm always cautious about sharing my thoughts about law school because they're not all positive. I don't necessarily think that everyone should go to law school. And funny enough, someone told me the same thing, but I didn't listen. So if you're a nurse and you're interested in law school, make sure that you watch this video. Feel free to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this with anyone else who may be interested. But also just listen to a little bit about my journey and then you can decide for yourself. So I graduated from law school in 2014, 10 years ago. But of course, before that, I was a nurse. So people always say, was it nursing first or was it law first? It was nursing. I went to school in 2003. I did 5 years at Howard University, HU, you know. And I immediately entered into the nursing program. So I declared my major as nursing from the beginning. That was the plan, and I kind of went through with it. So I started year one and year two, and then of course, year three, you do your prerequisites. I failed one of my prerequisites, so I had to do an extra year, which was the best year of my life in college. I had so much fun. I didn't have any pressure of all of these difficult nursing classes. I took all kind of classes, met new people, partied, like I had a great time. And then of course, the last 2 years were the nursing program, which were extremely difficult. I did a lot of internships, worked different jobs. As soon as I had the opportunity to become a CNA, which was, I think, right after the first semester of med-surg, I took a job and worked on an ortho floor. But I knew I wanted to work at the best at that time hospital in the world, which was Johns Hopkins. And so I worked really hard to get an internship, and I applied both in their ER at one of their campuses and then the OR at their main campus. And I ended up getting both, but I took the opportunity to go into the OR because it was even harder to get into the OR than it was the ER. So nursing was great because it allowed me to work overtime. I was living on my own in Baltimore. It helped me, begin to just grow up. Like it gave me the foundation that I needed to just figure out life post college and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And it surrounded me with amazing people, right? People who were just as passionate about patients and healthcare and life in general, and people who were just like forward thinkers, like a lot of people are now, who are like, nursing is a tool and you need to use it as a tool to get what you want. I didn't have that mindset at the time. I was really just focused on being passionate about being a nurse and then like figuring out what I was going to do next, right? Everybody around me was going back to school to become an MP or a CRNA. A lot of people were becoming CRNAs because they worked in the OR. So they had to leave, go to the ICU, get that experience, and go to CRNA school. And I knew that I wanted to get another degree, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed to get out of the OR to figure it out. So I tried to leave the OR and stay at the organization that I was at, and that proved to be extremely difficult. And so I started to look for other opportunities. I found a job back in DC doing pre-op PACU, and it was perfect because I was working early hours. I could get off and still enjoy the day. I live really, really close to work. I was back closer to my friends, back closer to the university. And so I was just happy to be back in DC. Like, Baltimore is a great place to live, but if you don't have a lot of family or friends, it can just be a little bit lonely, just like any place. Like, I don't think it's different from any place, but for me, it was like that. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends outside of work. And so I found myself running back and forth to DC where all my friends were. So I got back to DC and I was like, okay, I want to do something. What am I going to do? And I started looking at different programs, Masters of Public Health. I thought about law school, but it was like, I didn't know anyone who was a nurse and a lawyer. And people were like, just become an MP. One of my girlfriends who was working with me at the time, she was going to MP school. Another one of our coworkers was going back for his DNP because he wanted to go into leadership and kind of go that, CNO route. And I knew that it's what I may want to do, but I didn't want to be locked into that. So I started looking at Masters of Public Health programs But then when I started looking at Master of Public Health jobs, I couldn't find any that I felt that were, worth my time or money. So I started looking at law school where it was like, oh, average lawyers make $150,000, more money than I was making then. It gave me the opportunity to potentially do policy work or to do advocacy as well as to work as a lawyer. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. And at the time, the Affordable Care Act was coming out. And so there was a lot of conversation about changing healthcare, improving healthcare, and making things better. And what really pushed me over the edge was I had a patient who came into the pre-op PACU. I was working with them and their case was delayed. So I ended up spending more time with them, talking with them. It was in the afternoon. So we were slow, and he was a younger person, well educated. He had his doctorate and he was having surgery. And so we were talking about why he was having surgery. And he basically was like, I had a job, I lost my job, and then I lost my insurance. And when I went to a free clinic because I wasn't feeling well, they made me feel bad. They were, very condescending to me. And even though I was diagnosed as a newly diabetic, I didn't understand what that meant. And so I just kind of left and never came back. And I got a small nick on my leg that of course turned into a bigger wound and now is turning into an amputation. Me, like the big baby that I am, I bawled. I cried. And I was just like, what? And he was so at peace with it. He wasn't like emotional about it. And he was like, it was initially, he was like, overall it was my responsibility. But at the same time, it was really because of the way I was treated. And that just charged me up. I was like, I gotta go to law school. I have to change healthcare from the inside out. I have to do something. And being at the bedside feels like the answer, but it's only so much I can do. I can only help people who have already been diagnosed, who have already had a bad experience, who are already dealing with their health issues. So I decided to go to law school. I applied to a couple of different law schools. I went to Howard for undergrad. So I applied to Howard for law school. I didn't think I would get in, just like I didn't think I would get in for undergrad. My grades were not that great. I don't know what my LSAT score was. People have asked me. I have no idea. I may be able to find it, but it wasn't the greatest. And like I said, my GPA wasn't the greatest, but I have a good way of just being able to share my story and my resilience. And of course, I went to Howard, I graduated. And so I shared that as well. And I was able to get into 2 or 3 of the schools that I applied to and decided on Howard. And essentially I decided on Howard, not just because it was a great school, but it was in DC. I was already in DC, but I was also dating my now husband, who was like, I can help you if you stay in DC, but if you move to Virginia or somewhere else, like, you're on your own. And I was like, I can take all the help I can get, right? And so he did, right? He helped me through law school, helped me pay my way, pay my bills. I eventually got pregnant while in law school and I had a baby the first day of my second year, my 2L year. Had a C-section and had to return to school. Baby, I gotta tell that story separately. But anyways, I graduated on time for law school, and then you take the bar, right? So I was preparing to take the bar, but before you take the bar, you can apply for any job because their expectation is you're gonna take the bar and pass and then you'll be fine. So I'm applying to jobs, and people are saying, why would a nurse become a lawyer in the interview? Or people say, oh, you don't have enough experience clinically for jobs that didn't necessarily require clinical experience, or people just didn't feel that I was a good fit, right? The nursing experience didn't translate well on my resume, despite the fact that I had internships and I had done legal work while in law school in clinics. I really struggled with that. So I focused on studying for the bar. I ended up having a really hard loss in the middle of studying, didn't pass the first time, and then jumped back into nursing. I ended up working and moving to Houston and becoming a hospice nurse and was like, I'll figure it out later. Went back to take the bar, passed the bar, barely studied the second time and passed. And then again, I'm now back trying to find a job and really, really struggling. So my journey from nurse to lawyer definitely to me was simple, right? I worked as a nurse, applied to law school, got into law school and graduated. The more difficult part of the journey that makes me not want to encourage people to go to law school is how hard the job industry is for lawyers. Unless you have a very specific goal of working in big law and taking that trajectory, or doing public service, like the in between, right? If you don't necessarily want to work specifically for the government, or you don't necessarily want to work for big law, or you don't fit into that world, where does everybody else go? And so I've had a lot of challenges trying to find opportunities that allow me to share my expertise as a nurse and a clinician and a frontline worker, but also someone who is well trained as a lawyer and has all of this experience. And so when people ask me about going to law school, it really is that easy. Anyone can do it. You don't have to, work before you go to law school. They don't have any specific expectations for your work experience. But there are a lot of challenges for people to understand the value of nurses as lawyers. Years later, I eventually found other nurses who were lawyers. And of course, a lot of them are solo practitioners, meaning they work for themselves. They own their own law firms, because they had a hard time finding a place that valued and appreciated and really utilized their expertise. And so there are lawyers out there who work in-house. So that means they work for large healthcare companies or organizations as a lawyer, and their only client is that organization. There are nurses and lawyers who do defense work, whether it's criminal defense or board defense work, and they basically help nurses and other clinicians keep their license or protect their license or minimize some of the penalties depending on what they've been accused of. There are lawyers like me who do regulatory and compliance, which means I help healthcare organizations and businesses understand the rules and regulations that surround the scope of work that they do, and ensure that they're complying with the law before the government steps in and says that they're not complying with the law or they're in compliance. And there's everything in between, right? There are nurses and lawyers who do medical malpractice work or don't even work necessarily in healthcare. There's so many. They may do employment law or labor law or anything out there. I think there's no specific limitation to what a nurse lawyer can do, but there is the world who has expectations of what nurses and lawyers can do. So that's kind of my journey. There's so much more to it. I'm sure there are going to be a ton of questions. Feel free to drop those below. If you like this type of content, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. But more importantly, if you want to go to law school, go. My friend, who was my neighbor at the time, told me not to go to law school because of the challenges that she was having that I eventually ended up facing as well. And I didn't listen because I had my mindset on going to law school. That was what I wanted to do, and I had no other plan. But if you think that just because you want to be an advocate or you want to help people that you have to go to law school, that's not true. There are so many things that you can do without a law degree to help advocate for people, to help support your patients, to be engaged in the political process that doesn't require you being a lawyer. And on top of the expense of law school, on the challenges of the job market, and just the limitations that you have as a lawyer, sometimes I tell people it's easier to not be a lawyer and do the things you want to do than it is to be a lawyer and do the things you want to do. So again, if you have questions, I can't necessarily help you get into law school or help you navigate some of those difficult, parts of getting into law school, but I can't answer questions about my journey, about how to decide what law schools get fit for you. I did full-time, but there are part-time and nighttime programs that are out there for those who are working. And I will be sharing so much more about my experience in law school, my experience as a mom in law school, my experience post-law school, and then, of course, as an entrepreneur. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you guys again soon.